What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's me, Fitty Trent, and we're here for the live recap of all the games that happened in this past, few hours. And I'm joined with the awesome company in AC and Kevole. Guys, introduce yourselves, say hello.
Hello, I'm
AC.
Kevole. What is
no hockey? We gotta talk at the same time. It makes it even better, man.
Yeah,
Can stand out the most.
we stand out.
100%, man. What a day of hockey though it was, Trent. What a day. I caught most of the Rangers game, the St. Louis game, and then obviously all of the Edmonton game that just ended, and all of it was pretty good. And we saw some series stay the same, but then we also saw some series obviously tip in the other team's favor.
For sure, absolutely.
There's a storyline from all four of the games that I think is really interesting. Even the Pittsburgh-Columbus game, although Pittsburgh won handily, I think there's a story coming out of that one, what Matt Calvert did at the end. And also, I think the huge win for the Habs tonight, huge win for Jake Allen and the Blues again tonight. They're playing rope-a-dope, and the Edmonton Oilers had their first win in the playoffs since this song was a hit. That's right, bringing sexy back.
And that's what the Oilers did like tonight. They brought sexy back. Can we start with that game? I mean, we usually like to start with like the freshest one in our minds, and we all got to see that game. And the Oilers this game just looked like such a good, fast, complete team. I mean, you look at it period for period, and after the first period, I mean, I thought this was good. This was going to be another game between the Oilers and the Sharks like we saw in game one. Both of them were very competitive. Both of them looked very good, and that game went into overtime. So I was looking forward to this game also going to overtime. Next thing you know, the Sharks get a couple power plays here and there. Zach Kassian comes out of nowhere, gets a short-handed goal, his first of his career, assisted by Mark Letestu, who's been an excellent addition for the Oilers. And then next thing you know, we go into the third period, and I thought the Sharks would definitely be turning it on, but instead they get a ton of power plays. Connor McDavid gets another short-handed goal, and that's the end of the game, rather. What happened with the San Jose Sharks, and what happened with the Edmonton Oilers to make them this good and this threatening for this game?
Yeah, well, first, shout out to Blaze. What up, homie? Thanks for joining us. My big issue with this game, and I said it going in, I had Edmonton winning this series, was I think Sharks are somewhat on a downward, they're not at where they've been in the past, where they just made it to the Stanley Cup last year, but they've kind of had those runs to get to that moment. They didn't win, and now I think this game was a perfect example that the Oilers are the better team. There was a lot of invisible players for those Sharks. Here's the big narrative I look. Obviously, you can think about Oilers, but San Jose down most of the game. They had 4 shots in the third period. When you're down, this is playoffs. I know it's a 7-game series. I don't think this is going to be the same Sharks team that shows up in San Jose when they get home ice now. But still, if you're a Sharks fan, I would be worried because there was a lot of star players that you did not see. Plus, look at those bottom 6 players for San Jose. Where are the Wards? Where, maybe not Hansen, but they're paying who's the guy I mentioned?
Bodker.
Yeah, they're playing Bodker. What? They're paying him $5 million, and he played 14 minutes as a guy that's getting paid that much. I didn't think Paul Martin played that great. There's some of their defense, Dylan, Braun, Vlasic, I'll give credit because 5-on-5 did do really well against McDavid. There was a couple times McDavid tried to get by him, and Vlasic was just too good. And then look at that power play. I'll give credit to the Oilers in that game. They were quick. They had a great penalty kill, obviously. In a 7-game series, I think Oilers might be just too good for the San Jose Sharks.
All 10 seasons in one sitting.
Yeah, sorry, I have something going on here. Hang on. I was just pulling something up here.
His 99th birthday.
Trying to stand
there. Yeah, to me, this in terms of what happened there, I just felt like the I think the Oilers needed the game more than the Sharks for sure, but what came down to me, it was really interesting, was it was the bottom six of the Oilers tonight that really came through, like Zach Kassian, Letestu, those guys, and I outplayed the San Jose Sharks bottom guys. I didn't think the top players on either side, the top stars, were really all that great. Yes, McDavid got a goal, but he wasn't all that outstanding. He hasn't been all that outstanding in the series, quite frankly. But they did just the Oilers played a really disciplined. I mean, I thought they were a little tentative in the first, but once they got that first goal, they just kind of settled down. They settled into their rhythm. They played pretty much a road hockey game, which was much different than what they tried to do in game one, where they tried to feed with the fans and ride that emotion. They played like a veteran, disciplined hockey team. For the most part, I think that they took a lot of really bad penalties, and the Sharks' power play is inept, has been inept all year, continue to be inept, and I think that was a huge factor. If you allow not one but two shorthanded goals, you don't deserve to win any hockey games. But I do agree with Adam. I think as we're going through here, for the 6 periods, I would have to say the Oilers outplayed the Sharks pretty much. Except the second and the third and a little bit of that overtime, the Sharks kind of had a little bit of momentum. But the Oilers are clearly starting to show that they're the better team at this point.
Well, it's also because the Sharks are not the Sharks, but the Edmonton Oilers are so much more younger. So it's the kind of thing where the Sharks, they have a lot of older players. And, I'm going to get into a little thing that, AC was hinting at about some really good players and some really bad players. A lot of their old players really dropped the ball. I mean, you mentioned Ward, you mentioned Hansen, you mentioned Bodker. One player that really sharked me that did awful, Patrick Marleau. I mean, a guy that they look at to be basically their captain when Pavelski and Thornton aren't playing that very well. I mean, he's the next in line, and he did nothing this game, if you ask me. So it's the kind of thing where, are they being outplayed by the Edmonton Oilers? Yes. Today, as you said, Kev, it is their bottom six. As you said, Zach Kassian had a great night. I mean, you also got to look at Cam Talbot. He also had a pretty good night. He did only face 16 shots, so he wasn't challenged that much, but he was steady in the net. He did have a good few saves here and there. For the negative side of the Edmonton Oilers, as you said, the top six, for me personally, the worst player on the Oilers tonight was Leon Draisaitl. We saw him take one shot towards the net, and besides that, we didn't see him at all for the rest of the game. So I think that he could have done better there. And looking at the San Jose Sharks side, if I was looking at a player that did well other than Martin Jones, because Martin Jones is probably the only player that kept them in the game for so long, even though that no one else was in the game whatsoever. I mean, looking at their team very quickly, maybe, as AC said, Vlasic probably was one of their best players just from shutting down McDavid, which is usually tough to do. So those were probably my all-stars and my, not so good. AC, you mentioned a few names. Is there anyone else that really impressed you or really disappointed you at all?
No, I think in playoff hockey, right, you look at Kassian's performance, and that's what you need to do if your top line's not scoring. We've seen a lot of teams go far in the playoffs, maybe not all the way to the Stanley Cup, but off their bottom six scoring goals. We saw it a lot in other games too. You need that secondary scoring if it's not coming from your second line, because Edmonton, I'll give the first line, McDavid's line, a bit of credit, because I think McDavid was still somewhat noticeable. But if you're looking even to get more in depth of your top six, Maroon took 2 stupid penalties.
Yeah,
Draisaitl wasn't that great. And their second line, Nugent Hopkins, I'll give credit for because he was very good on the PK. But other than that, did anyone notice the Lucic Lucic with Eberle and Nugent Hopkins? Did anyone even notice that line 5-on-5? Those at the beginning of the season or the playoffs, I was like, that line's going to need some secondary scoring to help them throughout the playoffs. And they just seem invisible out there when these are guys that are pretty quality players.
Yeah, I haven't been entirely enamored with Lucic both games. I don't think he's been outstanding. The top six of the Oilers, I still think need to get going if they're going to want to win this series. Zach Kassian cannot be your best player. And I do think that another takeaway, and it's kind of I know it's a it's kind of weird to do this to the Oilers, even though they won. But I mean, discipline is a really big thing, and I think maybe this is the time to get into this, because let's just be really honest here. If the Oilers lost this game, the fans would have been bitching about the refereeing tonight. Because of the way that the power plays have gone. San Jose has 12, Edmonton has 6. And the fans are starting, and this is starting to become a little bit of a trend in all Canadian markets, where the fans are starting to blame the refereeing and complaining about the officiating. You've got to stay disciplined in the playoffs. It's just that simple. You can't expect the referee to come and help you out. It's not the way that it's going to go. You can't. The referee is not there to play 50-50. The referee is there to be the referee. And you know what? There were bad calls on both sides. So you can't be blaming the officiating for your losses. And I think that the Oilers need to be disciplined if they're going to win this series. And I do think that there was a lack of that tonight. The Sharks' power play is awful. They might as well decline it and just take the yards.
Yeah, they might as well, but it's the kind of thing where they've also been on the road, and Edmonton has been pumping up like their entire crowd. They've been excited. They've been alive. They've been arguably the best crowd of the playoffs so far. Do you think it will change when they go back to San Jose? Because now Edmonton's going to San Jose, and San Jose was one of the best playoff markets last year during the Stanley Cup Finals. So they're definitely going to have the crowd behind them there. Do you think that's going to have a big difference anywhere?
I think so. I think the Sharks will gain some momentum from that. I can see that series being split 3-4. One team wins one, the other team wins another. But I do think that the fans and the San Jose has gotten into hockey for sure. So I think the fans will be readily involved.
Yeah, no, I think the same with what you guys said. I think they'll be involved, but I still think the way this series is gone in this game, like Kevole said, 4 of 6 outplayed, Oilers the better team. I don't see that changing a lot. Yeah, the crowd might pump them up, but it still doesn't, all of a sudden, just because the crowd's cheering, Couture's all of a sudden going to be the same Couture that we've seen in the past. Marla's always going to be 10 years younger. All that stuff's not going to happen. So I think Jones has to continue to somewhat keep them in games, which he did, right? Those goals were somewhat similar with Schwatz. Maybe not Cassian's because it was just a legit breakaway, but both were kind of along the ice, kind of five. I think was McDavid's somewhat 5-hole, right? Or along the ice or low?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
But anyways, those are tough to save, but he did make some good saves throughout the game, so he's going to have to play better. But like you said, the power play at home, maybe that's what they need with the crowd cheering to be on the power play, because what I saw on the power play for 12 minutes, because they were 0 for 6, and at least having 2 power plays in the third and only getting 4 shots in the whole period, it's just not good enough. And it's lucky that it's a 7-game series. Every game's a new game, so we'll see what happens in San Jose.
The other big thing is Klefbom. If he's back or not, that's a huge loss. And the Oilers have a thin defense. Like, they have a good defense, but they do have a thin defense. You can't afford necessarily to lose a Klefbom, so that will be interesting going forward as well.
Also, we haven't seen a Joe Thornton in this series whatsoever, and he may be somewhat of a difference maker. I don't think he'll be a huge asset to the Sharks, but he plays hard, and he's a playoff performer, so it might be a little addition.
And I think Pavelski plays better with Joe on the wing. Joe Thornton as the center and Pavelski on the wing. And then you can drop Couture down to more of a second line, because I didn't even see, like we said it with the Sharks, I didn't even see anything that remotely even looked like a second line or who they even were on the Sharks tonight.
Yeah.
Well said. I mean, we'll see what happens in the future from the series. As we said, the Sharks are now going to be going hosting at home, so maybe it will be a different series, maybe not, because Edmonton has been looking so good and so commanding. We have our friend Jeremy in the chat. What's going on, Jeremy? I understand that he wants us to talk about the Rangers game, and don't worry, we will. That's coming up, but that will probably be last. We like to go from, the newest ones that ended.
Hello?
Trent?
All the way kind of. What's up? Hello? Yes?
Oh, you froze there for a second.
Froze a bit.
I froze for a bit. Well, basically what I said was, we'll be doing Rangers near the end. That'll be a little bit later on. We're right now going to be moving on to the St. Louis Blues and Minnesota Wild game. And AC, you got to do that game. So, I hope you enjoyed it because I got to do the first game. And honestly, the first game was a little bit disappointing. The first game was basically Jake Allen versus the Minnesota Wild. And looking at some of these stats, it basically looked like that's kind of the way that meant out to be now. So you want to shed some light on us about that game?
Well, first of all, it was not as exciting as game one. Jake Allen was still very good, but St. Louis only had 22 shots. Minnesota only had 24. That's down a lot from 53 or whatever they had in game one. Minnesota, obviously Edmunsson scores another goal. He gets the overtime one again. Then he scores first in this game to give St. Louis a 1-0 lead. Parise then scores on a 5-on-3 in the second period, which tied up at 1. And then Schwatz for St. Louis, 2 minutes left pretty much, just has a nice snipe with Prawn screening in front. At the end of the day, St. Louis, for probably the second game in a row, probably wasn't the best team on the ice, but they still get the W because Minnesota is really snake-bitten. They're having a very hard time scoring, which I took St. Louis in this series. And it wasn't to do with me thinking St. Louis was a better team. It was just more, like we've talked with Kevin too. I think, the Wild aren't just – nothing really is splashy about the Wild. And I think St. Louis, they're getting good goaltending, which you need in the playoffs. We've seen, especially in first rounds before, that a goalie can win you a series and you don't need to score that much like they have. You know what I mean? So it was a great game in that respect because you always like to see in the playoffs a team score with 2 minutes left to win the game. But Minnesota is in trouble. And both those games, they were at home, right? So all of a sudden you lose 2 at home. It's tough. But Minnesota's got to start scoring and hope Jake Allen gets the flu or something. Because I think if Jake Allen stays on that ice against the Minnesota Wild, this series is not going to last long.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I got to catch a little bit about the game. And honestly, what I've seen from the St. Louis Blues, I think you've nailed on the head. Their superstars aren't showing up. It's just basically the rest of the team is playing okay enough to get them by. Minnesota's sucking so much that the rest of the team is getting them by. Joel Edmunsson has 2 goals in 2 games. This guy used to be a top 4 defenseman in the AHL a couple of years ago. And now he scores 2 goals in 2 playoff games. Jayden Schwatz, okay, that one makes a little bit of sense. And Zach Parise, he used to be good. And now he seems to be the only player that can score for the Minnesota Wild. You look at the Blues side, one player that really disappointed me in this game and basically this entire series, Vladimir Tarasenko. Where has he been whatsoever? I expected him to be all about the offense. He only has 3 shots in this game. And, he's usually taking 5, 6, 7 or more shots every single game. And he's kind of getting, a little bit puck shy. He's not shooting the puck as much. Looking at the Minnesota side, you got no one that's doing good whatsoever. Eric Stahl got his first point, and he's been doing red hot for the Minnesota Wild, and no one else is stepping up. As I said, Zach Parise, he's the only one that's actually scoring any points whatsoever. Jonas Brodin's doing bad. I think he has -3 or -4 for this playoff series. He's been on the ice every single time that St. Louis has been scored against. And as you said, they're now going on the road. So it's the kind of thing where, are they going to be able to win a game on the road? Because St. Louis, they're on a roll right now, and I don't know if they're going to be able to be stopped.
Well, you know what? I think a couple things here. Jake Allen is probably in my top 3 of best goaltending so far in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Give him credit, and he's played really well since that coaching change. And the Blues don't have to. I think that one of the things is the Blues don't have to score a lot of goals right now because they're playing. They know that they've got the goaltending, and really right now the pressure is all on the Minnesota Wild because they were the ones that were the favorites. They were the ones that were competing with the Blackhawks, but they were on such a terrible slide at the end of the year. They were on. It was reminiscent to what the Sharks slide was, but nobody really talked a lot about that. And people were just making this assumption that the Wild were a better team than I think people gave them credit for. And the Blues just come in and just played really generally pretty simple hockey. It's not pretty, but it's playoff hockey. It's road hockey. 2-1. Hey, it gets you up 2-0. That's all you need to do. I mean, it's not about the style points. It's about the win, right? And that's what they're doing. And the Wild have to learn that.
Good points there, Kev. Do either of you think that Minnesota has a chance of winning even a single game left in this series whatsoever?
Oh, of course they do.
Yeah. No, they have a chance just because obviously these games have been close, and they were 2 minutes away from this going into overtime again, right? And in overtime, we know anything can happen. But I do think, let's be honest. I do think Jake Allen's a good goalie. Is he playing maybe a bit above his pay grade and his talent level? Might be, right? So there could be a drop off. All it takes is him to be, take 10 how he's playing right now, and then minus 10 or 15%, and those are probably some goals that Minnesota could get. But like I said, I don't see him slowing down right now, and this just screams like a series of Jake Allen just shutting them down for maybe 4 or 5, how many ever games that takes. But I think maybe at this point 5, Blues in 5, maybe Minnesota gets 1. But I think Blues have most of the momentum. And with this Minnesota team in the last couple of years, they have a lot of pressure. They haven't done anything in a long time with bringing in those big guys like Parise and Suter, what is that, 6 years ago now with those big contracts, or 5 years. And they thought having those 2 guys on their team would put them should be contending for the West every single year, at least getting to the Western Conference, or at least sniffing at the Western Conference Finals. And they haven't been able to do that. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. I just don't think people paid enough attention to the St. Louis Blues, though. They aren't a very sexy team for a lot of people. And the Wild had a really hot streak, unlike Columbus. And I think people, I look at Minnesota and I just don't see them. I don't see. Yeah, they have Parise, but it feels like there's something missing on that team. And it's almost to me like they're playing not to lose, not trying to win. And there's a big difference there.
Those are all fair points. So basically what we're all trying to say is, the series isn't over yet, but St. Louis has been looking very good, or at least good enough in the games that they've been playing so far. So, it will be interesting to see. As we all said, Minnesota, get your head out of your ass. You need to play better. St. Louis, they're still winning, and they're winning without Paul Stastny, which I think is the biggest thing. If they get Paul Stastny back, they're going to be that much better because he's your face-off dynamo right there, wins all the draws. So if you can get Stastny back, that will be the biggest thing for you.
And just a quick note, too. They had Minnesota had 64% of the face-offs. They out-hit them by 17, and they outshot them to lose. Which, if you're just looking at a box score type thing, looking at those stats, you have the face-offs, you have the physical play, and you have the shots. More often than not, those teams win. So it's just not working out for them right now.
That's a very good point there, AC. So we'll see what Game 3 has to offer. Moving on to the next game that a couple of us saw little bits and pieces. Mitch was mainly the guy that did it, but I have Mitch's notes right on my phone, was the Blue Jackets versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. And basically what happened in this game, as always, the Flower stands tall in the playoffs when he needs to, when it's produced on him. If there's all the pressure on him, he does bad, but if he doesn't have to win every single game, he does good for some reason. And of course, Crosby, Ginsel, Rust, the young guys, they're getting it done. That line, Sherry, they're getting it done. They're playing excellent hockey. They end up taking this game 4-1 with goals from Sidney Crosby, Jake Gunsel, Evgeny Malkin, Patrick Hornqvist. And I really like how Malkin's come back from an injury. I think he's looked very solid, probably like one of the best Penguins in this entire game. And Mitch told me that the Blue Jackets, they played okay, but just not good enough. And I know that there's a big topic that happened at the end of this game involving Matt Calvert with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and him actually breaking his stick over Jake Gunsel, I believe, was the player. And honestly, that was very poor tactics. Very, very sad to see. We don't see him really have a fit like that and get upset, but it's the kind of thing where, it was dangerous. It was awful to watch. And Do you guys think that maybe he should be suspended for this? Because I don't think that any of these plays should be tolerated in the NHL whatsoever.
The stick must have been broken beforehand or something, because the way it broke, I think it was actually, was it Kunakle who was that he
Something
hit?
like that, yeah.
But it looked like it almost was broke beforehand, because the way it snapped didn't look like it put that much pressure. Obviously, it's a very dirty play. Obviously, I don't think he tried to go for the neck or the head. I think it was kind of trying to go for the shoulder, and it kind of goes up a bit too high, breaks. Total, not a hockey play. He will be suspended. This is, we talk about player safety, and we've seen the last couple of years, it's so hard to determine what they're going to do, because we've seen guys spear guys really badly or slash guys really badly, and the max they're getting is like 1 to 2 games, and these are repeat offenders. So with Calvert, I don't think he's a repeat offender. It doesn't look as worse as it should have been. Do you guys agree with me?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it should be a suspension. He went back at him. He jumped at him first, then he missed him, and then he went back at him. That's the problem I have with that. It wasn't one attempt at a cheap shot. It was 2 attempts at a cheap shot. So that to me that should be suspendable. But you're right, Adam. Unfortunately, I think what the NHL does is sometimes they flip a coin, because there's no consistency with this stuff. And I think it's really unfortunate, but it was a really cheap, dirty play, and I do think that one should be a suspension.
Jeremy thinks it should be a suspension. 1 game, he said.
Yeah, which I agree to. 1 to 2 games, maybe. I know there's a lot of talk on social media and Twitter that they were like, you're probably not going to see him until next season. But actually, that makes sense, because it looks like Pittsburgh's going to sweep them anyway. So if he gets a 2-game suspension, it's not going to matter, because there's no way Columbus. And getting back to the game, Pittsburgh, I think most people called it. Pittsburgh just too good. We talked a lot about how they were going to mesh, because they get those guys back from injuries. It's looking like having Gunstill and Sheary back for Crosby is helping him. You get Malkin playing with Kessel again. And just Crosby, man, like some of the plays he makes. And then I'll give credit to Fleury too, because I know Mitch, a big Pens fan, I think he's more of a Murray fan than Fleury. What do you do now? He's a guy that made 43 saves in this game. You almost got to keep playing Fleury until something happens. But I don't know what you guys think about that, because with the Murray injury, if Murray's able to come back, when do you decide that? Are you going to wait for Fleury to have one of those bad games that could cost you, a series or a game? Who knows? You
need 2 goalies to win. I think I'm one of those big believers that you need 2 goalies to win a series. So if Fleury stumbles and Murray is ready, then that's fine. Losing a game, like the reality is you can't. It's going to be next to impossible for any of these series to have a sweep. Everyone's going to lose at least 1 or 2 games. So I think you kind of have to have that mindset going in, and that's why you need both of your goalies going. So if Fleury loses the next game, then you go and bring Murray in at that point. But if Fleury is hot, just keep rolling with him, and maybe you need Murray for Washington. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. You need to have 2 goaltenders. I mean, I made a video on the Bottom Line View about the possible goaltender controversies of this playoffs, because so many teams, they do have 2, reasonably okay, if not really solid goaltenders. I mean, no one is better as the Pittsburgh Penguins, but I think that you have to go with the hot hand. I agree with Kev. You have to go with Fleury until he either loses a game or they barely win it, like a really high-scoring game that they barely win it. And from a Columbus standpoint, what do you guys think that they need to do to get back in this series? I mean, Bobrovsky's been playing good. He's been playing solid, just not to all the tasks of keep on getting hammered by shots. For me, I think Cam Atkinson really needs to start turning it on, because I've not seen enough from him at all during these playoffs. I mean, this game, he did turn it on a little bit more, but still, it's not enough. You're the leading scorer of your team. You need to start turning it on, because this is playoff time. That's what I think. What about you guys?
Well, I don't know. If you just look at the shots, right? They're getting almost 40 shots a game. They might not be good shots. They're getting almost 40 shots again. They had maybe they should focus a bit more on scoring some goals than hitting. They had 51 hits. You know, I feel like the whole John Tortorella and how he thinks what you need to do to win playoffs and win playoff games is just like beat the shit out of the other team, because Columbus has the size to be able to do that, but you need to focus on a little bit of skill oriented. And then sometimes when you're going against Crosby and Malkin, it doesn't matter even what you do, because you're going against some of the two great players in the NHL. They're getting the shots. I think, you know, they'll need a good break, but at the end of the day, I think everyone saw Pittsburgh winning this series regardless of even if Columbus played really well.
Yeah, I think Torts is trying to wear them down a little bit and trying to be physical with them, which is fine. They don't have the skill to compete with Pittsburgh, which is the big issue to me, and I think that's what's going to make it rough. Now, I think if you're Pittsburgh, you really want to win this series as quickly as possible and get out of this as quickly as you can, because I mean, Game 3 and 4. I mean, we talk about San Jose being a really good crowd. Columbus is also a really good playoff crowd too, so they'll have a little bit of that adrenaline there. Which can get them at least one win, I think, in Columbus. If they can get two, that makes it interesting, I guess. But yeah, I think if you're Pittsburgh, you want to get out of this as quickly as possible.
There you go. So basically what we're trying to say is, Columbus, keep on trying, keep on doing your best, but unfortunately, we all think that your days might be numbered. But they might have a better team in the future. Just sadly, this year, they're facing basically an unstoppable force. And speaking of unstoppable forces, two Dynamos, our final game review, the one that you've all been asking for, the Montreal Canadiens versus the New York Rangers. And I don't know about you guys, but I luckily got to watch this entire game. I mean, this was very exciting, just like Game 1. I mean, Game 1 was very good, very close, even though it was a 2-0 game. But this game was a lot better, a lot more physical. I mean, Jeff Petry opens up the goal scoring off of a slash. Brendan Gallagher slashed, you know, the stick in half of Henrik Lundqvist. Doesn't have a stick, so he can't defend one side of the net. Jeff Petry scores. Michael Grabner might have scored the most beautiful breakaway goal I've ever seen in these playoffs. Probably the best goal of the playoffs so far. It was incredible. I loved it after a shot block. Next thing you know, AC and Kevole's two favorite players on the Canadiens, they combine for a beautiful goal. You got Paul Byron and Brendan Gallagher. And I really liked Gallagher in this game, just as a little side note. I thought in the first game he was being kind of an idiot, kind of had his head in his ass and thought that he was an all-star when, you know, he's a good player, but he was trying to start a fight with every single player, including the ref and the fans and like the entire arena. So it was kind of good to see him focusing on scoring more than fighting this game. Then we go into the second period. Rick Nash gets a goal, Mats Zuccarello. And then the third period. And the third period is when you saw the most desperation from Montreal. It was really close, really good. Last 20 seconds, Tomas Plekanec, the great Czech Republican player, scores a goal, sends it off to overtime. And that's when we get to see a lot of back and forth hockey. But it wasn't overly back and forth, as Montreal basically hemmed in the Rangers into their own zone. Lundqvist almost had to make 50 saves. And eventually, Mitch's favorite Montreal Canadian and favorite Russian ever, Alexander Radulov, scores the goal in overtime. And this was honestly probably the best game for me that I got to watch so far in the playoffs out of all the games, just because this is such a competitive series and it was so good, and it was definitely proven tonight. And this might have had to be a must win for the Montreal Canadiens because they're going back to the New York Rangers now.
Yeah, I think a key for me is the Rangers did look very good against Montreal. Montreal had a ton of shots, credit to Lundqvist. But that goal with, 15 seconds left, if somehow you stop them, because when you look at this series, and if you told me that the Rangers scored 3 goals against Carey Price, I would tell you that they won that game no matter what. So that was tough to see if you were a Rangers fan, right? Because you're 17 seconds away. You scored 3 goals against one of the best goaltenders in the world, which normally doesn't happen. And, throughout the course of playoffs the last couple of years, we've seen that a lot. It's very rare that the team that lets in the goal with 17 seconds to go to overtime wins that game, right? It's just, I don't know, there's a weird odds thing with that, because you just lose a lot of momentum knowing that you were 15-10 or whatever late in the game. You're 15 seconds away from taking a 2-0 lead, and all of a sudden you're sitting in that locker room for another 20 minutes to play another 20 minutes or 18, whatever it turned out to be, of hockey, right? So
yeah, first of all, I think Henrik Lundqvist has been the best goalie so far in the first little bit here. In my opinion, I don't know if anyone agrees with me or not. I think he's been outstanding, so credit to that. But the Montreal Canadiens, absolutely in desperation time for sure, Trent. They generally, I thought, kind of dominated the game for the most part. They had a lot of chances. That Plekanec, Byron, Gallagher line was rolling. I thought Jeff Petry was outstanding tonight. I mean, it was a huge, huge win that Montreal kind of needed. I wouldn't say really needed, kind of needed. The Rangers are not a good team at home. They're, I think, the worst playoff team at home. They have the worst record of all the playoff teams at home, I think, or close to it. So they didn't necessarily need to win this game tonight, but I think it was a huge way to win the game with the last second. Getting Plekanec to play, and the overtime goal, credit Steve Ott. He got the puck out and started that play off, and then Radulov, who had a goal and assist, it wasn't as bad, I think, as some people thought. I thought he was pretty solid. They found a way to win, and that's really important. I mean, they've been taking the play for the most part. The Rangers, they got in his face a little bit more than they did in game one, which was a difference. But that physicality that I talked about in the playoff preview is starting to come around a little bit, and you can see why you pick up a Weber and an Ott and some of those things. My big worry with the Canadiens, though, is they had to go to mostly 4 defensemen at the second half of the game. Mispronouncing that name, but Nemtsov was not very good tonight again. They used him very sparingly. So one of the things going forward is that depth on defense, that 5th and 6th defenseman for the Canadiens need to be a little bit better if they are going to win the series. Because certainly the Rangers did have their chances. They have a lot of offense. They have a solid 6 defense core. So your 5th and 6th defensemen of Montreal need to step up, I think, a little bit more than they did. So that's the one area I would be concerned about Montreal. But I think they could win both games in New York. I think it's not unrealistic for that to happen. But it was by far the best hockey game. It was absolutely exciting. It was a crazy game, by far the most exciting game so far, I would suggest, in these playoffs.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Kev. I'd agree that Nesterov and Beaulieu, those were the 2 defensemen I believe that you're thinking of, really were letting down the Montreal Canadiens, especially since you look at the goals that the Rangers scored, and they scored 1 on the breakaway and basically 1 on like a 2-on-1, and both those defensemen
had line change as well.
Yeah, bad line changes, and they just weren't hustling. They weren't hustling towards the puck. They were definitely probably the worst players for Montreal. I'm glad that Claude Julien listened to me and got his head out of his ass and played Alex Galchenyuk actually on a decent line. Galchenyuk played all of last game on basically the 4th line, and you really saw it in his play because Galchenyuk, he was a first-round pick, really high. I mean, you expect him to be your number 1 center, and you put him on the 4th line. This game, he got to play a little bit more and, a little bit more of a scoring role, which was good to see. He definitely excelled at that. Tanner Glass on the New York Rangers side, I think, played a very good physical game, had 10 hits, was getting in everyone's face all the time, which was very nice to see. I mean, Grabner was using a lot of his speed out there. Nash has actually been looking surprisingly well in this playoff series. We don't see Nash usually use a lot of speed, but it seems like he does have a little bit of a skip in his step, which I've liked seeing. And of course, as you said there, Kev, the defense for the New York Rangers, they did well in this game. They did pretty well, especially Smith. I really like Smith on the defensive core. I think he played pretty well.
Yeah, I think Brendan Smith, I haven't seen a lot of Rangers games since they got him, but I think this was, from what I've heard, this is one of his best games as a Ranger, being there from the trade deadline on. Another kind of X factor that I do like, Dano playing with Radulov and Pacioretty. He's kind of a workhorse on that line. And I think if you're, cheering for Montreal, watch for that line to maybe do some damage in the future, because Danault's kind of the workhorse, gets the puck, gets rid of the puck, gets it to Pacioretty, gets it to Radulov. And I was really impressed for him, because normally a guy, has been kind of a bottom six is most of his career. And now, playing on the top line as that workhorse, getting the puck. And he was key on one of the goals, and he was even, I think he kept the puck in too in overtime as well.
Yeah, they were. He would. Yeah, he was the guy that kept it in, put it to Pacioretty or to Radulov. Andrew Shaw also, I thought, played really well tonight too. Certainly they're playing well. They're playing well. They're showing a lot of grit. So it's going to be interesting going forward.
Yeah, and I think even if you're a Rangers fan, I don't think you're not too worried, because I still, at the end of the day, this is still a 7-game series. This is still, each game is going to go down to the end. Each team is going to have opportunities to score. It's going to be close. So it's still so early. It's 1-1. Now it's a 5-game series. If you think about it, if you're a Rangers fan, the positive you can think of, you won one in your away. Obviously, Kev, you were saying they're bad at home, whatever. I guess they're not really thinking about it at this point. But, yeah, you're like, okay, 1-1 against a team that was first place, and the Rangers are a wild card team. You got to be somewhat happy. And you were 15 seconds away from going back to New York with a 2-game lead.
Yep. Yep.
Perfectly said there, AC. Anything else before we close it out on any of the games that we saw, or anything to tease coming up on the Bottom Line View there, guys?
No, just like we got recaps, and there should be some good games tomorrow and Sunday. I guess like every night, no days off here.
Yeah, it's no days. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting tomorrow as well. Some good games tomorrow as well.
There you have it. We have tons of games every single day. And we're not just doing game reviews about the NHL. Don't worry. If you are not the biggest NHL fan, we also got NBA, NFL, and we also got wrestling. And, maybe a few other things on the way. So be sure to check all those out. Subscribe, like, and comment on all the Bottom Line View videos, because we're getting bigger, we're getting better. And if you want to see these guys, trust me, I know that you do, because they're great and they're working around the clock 24/7 to make the best content for you. So thanks for checking out the live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out, everybody.